you lead a company which has 2,000 employees and you probably back up more than half the data of the world.
If you're not number one, what are you doing to become number one to create sustainable growth and profits? That's the goal of a company, is to create sustainable growth and profits. And then just because you've formulated a strategy that's exciting, it doesn't mean it's game over. You have to go to execute.
Yes.
So the good news is, it's very rarely the case in business that you're a dictator making the decision on your own.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually good because you have checks and balances.
Yeah.
Everything in life, in the art of a deal, is getting past no or getting to yes.
Yes.
And these are two good skills that every leader, and it's not just in business. There are people in your life. It might be a spouse, it might be a best friend, it might be a child. It's a negotiation,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
You're trying to get them past no, or you're trying to get them to yes.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, in business, we're all kind of friends, even competitors.
Yes. Hello and welcome to another super fantastic episode of Pitch Cafe podcast. I have to thank my stars today, because I'm with a very unusual person. I'll tell you why. This person heads one of the fastest growing technology companies in Silicon Valley, and it is listed as the most loved workplace in 2023. But in the same year, it also aced the Gartner's quadrant in data security and data backup. Now, how does one company get to do both? Be acing in the technology domain and also make the workplace happy and comfortable for employees. This can't happen without leaders, and not just leaders, but visionary leaders who emphasize employee wellness and also excellence. With huge honor, I'd like to bring on Pitch Cafe podcast, Sanjay Poonen.
Thank you, Vida. It's a very honor to be on your show. All those things you've said, we're grateful for, and delighted to talk to you today about the company, about leadership, anything that your viewers would enjoy.
Wonderful. Sanjay, you went to Dartmouth and Harvard, and when I listen to your interviews, you're just so human. You talk about servant leadership. So that's something which really touched me. And I want to ask you, you lead a company which has 2,000 employees and you probably back up more than half the data of the world. What kind of leadership style has grown in you? You were a startup founder at Alpha Blocks, and then you had this amazing run at SAP and VMware, and you name it, at every company you've been so great. So how has this style evolved? You know, my favorite analogy is like a slow boat, and then like a fast boat, and then there's this steamer. So how did you run the show? Along the way? How did you grow yourself?
Well, I think it's a really good question. Everyone has their influences in their life. I've talked publicly about my mother. Like you, I'm an Indian American. I came here as an immigrant. And, in India, we were, I would say, lower middle class by all American standards. That's poor. And, in growing up as a kid, I didn't want to be a leader. The things that I've done today were not something, if you asked me at age 8, are you in your 50s, are you going to be CEO, are you going to be COO, whatever it is. But I saw people in my life that I respected. My mom she's not a very tall person, but I call her heart. She's got the, kind of the heart of a lion, even though she's just probably 5'2". And I saw in her the desire to stand up for the underdog. I was growing up at school, I was bullied, I had thick glasses. So for all the things that happened to kids that caused them to be bullied on the playground, I knew that my mom was my biggest defender. And I could come home and my home was a fortress. So I think part of the job of a leader is to be the defender of that team. You got to be the mother bear.
Yes.
And those instincts I saw from a person who wasn't very tall. Some of the greatest people I've admired in life were people who fought for the underdog. Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa. These are people who dedicated their life to servant leadership. So these were born in people I saw. And then when I came to the US as an immigrant, with very little in my pocket, you're an underdog again here, right? You have to establish yourself in a place. The amazing thing about this country, yes, there is elements of racism and other things you have to face. I was very fortunate that I faced some of it, but it never daunted me. But for the most part, I would say America's an amazing country where if you work hard, Clearly, we have some God-given gifts. Maybe we're smart or whatever have you. But if you work hard, anything's possible. And that certainly played itself out for me in the Silicon Valley. I mean, I did not plan to be a CEO on the business side. I wanted to be an engineer.
Yeah.
And I was so excited when I came to the Silicon Valley in the early 1990s that I could work at Apple because the Mac was my favorite, device I was working on in college. Steve Jobs was one of those iconic leaders. I wanted to work in his company. Design at Apple was incredible. So everything since then has been learning. Learning. And then at some point after I finished business school, as you pointed out, I was at a startup. And then my leadership side in terms of management started to get a little more exposure. But I wouldn't say if you plotted it out, it was some organized plan. I mean, the river kind of flowed along, and over time it got more momentum. And I look back in the last 30 years in tech, it's all been one, kind of jigsaw puzzle that I'm learning along the way.
Yeah, wonderful. You seem to be very open to learning, and I feel you're a person who lives in the moment and you cherish that. On that note, working in a startup is very different. It's like a small, close-knit family, but as you scale, you become a tribe, and then you become a city. Now, how did you adjust to that change? Obviously, you've had a great run at small, mid-size, and now a fairly large company. So how do you adjust to that? Because there is the Dunbar's number, where there are few people who in yours, a sacred space, and you have to cross the Dunbar's number. How did you cross that chasm?
Well, I think one of the best things that in my career helped me after I finished business school at Harvard, I joined a startup. And before I was I was blessed to be successful at SAP and VMware. My years at AlphaBlocks and Informatica really taught me a lot. I was very interested in analytics. In fact, other than security, which I spent a lot of my time at VMware doing, analytics, now what we call AI, was like what I did for many, many years. Wow. And at a startup, you realize if you're going to establish your brand, you have to stand out. Yes. You have to be 10x better than your competitors. And from the people I worked with, as engineers, the CEO, the investors, I learned that skill. And I would say the next jobs, whether it was Informatica or SAP or VMware, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, kind of a startup type of person inside a bigger company. Yeah. And, SAP was circa 80,000, maybe 100,000 people. VMware was 40,000. Yeah. I did not want that status quo type of job. I tell people, and maybe it comes from my being an immigrant, I know only one speed, which is we move fast. We move fast, we're decisive, we're responsive, we're innovative. I talk about often this picture of a plane with two jets. One is product innovation, that's customer obsession. Yeah. Those fundamental principles I learned at a startup. Mm-hmm. So even though I worked at bigger companies, I've always sought to bring that. I'd say the other piece that's been kind of a calling card for me, again, it kind of comes back to my immigrant roots and maybe my mom and my dad and the upbringing. Whatever you do it to the best that you can. Like it's life is too short. Be passionate about what you're doing. And again, that hard work ethic probably comes from my being an immigrant. You increase your likelihood of success. It's not guaranteed you're going to be successful, but if you work hard, your odds go up. Yeah. And and then of course, the other things that just hard work on its own and being an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur isn't a recipe for success. Yeah. You need some strategic ideas of what you're going to do that changes the game. And I've been very fortunate. Those ideas of what we do, I never bake in on my own. It's done in concert with a brain trust of people. So whether it was an SAP, we need to get into analytics, and we end up doing some acquisitions, Outlook Soft and Business Objects. Or VMware, we need to get into security, and we did acquisitions like AirWatch and others. We're really formed by a brain trust. Yeah. I mean, I had some ideas while I was benchmarking and I was testing them with other people, with customers often. Here at Cohesity, we need to move from number 8 to number 1. We've done this bold move to acquire. These are ideas that change the game.
How does one do that? What's your framework? I know a lot of people use a game as an analogy. Obviously, you're not I wouldn't use golf for your pace. Is it basketball? What do you
I love sports. You could pick your favorite sport. Whether it was cricket growing up in India, and then after that, football, soccer. Now I love American football, basketball. Any game is a good way to think about it. If you want to take a more stable game, chess.
Yeah.
Chess games are great because you have a front line and you have a back line, a backboard.
Yes.
You have the major pieces in the back, but the pawns are also important to the game. And I've always asked ourselves, if we're going to be number one, there's an element of both execution and strategy that you have to bring to the way. And,
Yeah.
listen, maybe my going to business school helped pull on that DNA. But I think even prior to that, I always had a sense of, if you're not number one, what are you doing to become number one to create sustainable growth and profits? That's the goal of a company, is to create sustainable growth and profits. And clearly, when you're number one, you have a pole position to do that. Usually in any industry, the number one and number two players capture the bulk of the profits. Then you got to be worried about somebody behind you trying to displace you.
Yeah.
When I got to SAP, I remember talking to the leadership and said, we are systems of record. We need a system of engagement, which is the analytics layer. And that led us to all the big moves we made, Business Objects, Outlook Soft, and then eventually HANA. But the whole principle was SAP as a system of record was not enough.
Yeah.
And then building that system of engagement was a business I was very honored to put. Same thing with VMware. I joked, I was running end user computing. We could end user computing. We didn't move into security. We ended up buying AirWatch and so on. So there was a formulation that allowed us to make, and same thing here, Cohesity was doing really well. But we had an opportunity in the context of this deal to go from number 8 to number 1 in a once in a lifetime kind of move. So once you sense that deal is possible, you put all of your brains on that. You put all of the brain trust into it, and you keep it highly confidential.
Yeah.
Because literally, when you're working on this, a very small group of people have to work really hard, and you don't want any leaks.
Yeah.
And that's really been for us. And sometimes these deals don't work out. Sometimes they do.
Yeah.
But I've been very fortunate at all three, SAP, VMware, and Cohesity. We haven't closed Veritas as yet, but it looks very good to us to close. I think this will be a game-changing move. And then just because you have formulated a strategy that's exciting, it doesn't mean it's game over. You have to go to execute.
Yes.
I mean, we acquired AirWatch and VMware, but then it was 2 years of really hard work. And then Workspace ONE became, everyone was talking about it. So just because we have announced our intent to acquire Veritas doesn't make us instantly number one. We've got to go execute it. And I would say, come back to us a year from now,
Yes.
and I'll be able to tell you, listen, not just was the strategy good, we executed well on that, right? So these are the things that make business exciting. And if you are a student of business, these are the things you like. And it's the same thing with sport. You plan the sport, then you've actually got to go and play the sport.
Yeah.
And just because you plan it doesn't mean you're going to win. You have to show up on the field and win. And then you win, and then you plan for the next game.
Yeah.
And business is no different.
Amazing. As you were explaining your wins at VMware and SAP and now here at Cohesity, I was thinking, how does somebody like you approve a decision of build versus buy? Because I know speed is something you always think about, but you're also so particular about executing well. It's a very tough call at your stage with the momentum you have at Cohesity. How do you make that call?
Well, first off, I wouldn't call it a win just for me. It was a team. It was always a team. You win. I mean, there's this great African saying I like to quote, which is, if you want to run fast, you run alone. If you want to run far, you run together. Yeah. So I've always believed there's a brain trust. When you're making these important decisions, there's a brain trust advising you. In some cases, there's a brain trust approving it. Mm-hmm. So at SAP, I was not the CEO. There was a CEO. There was an executive team. They had to approve so I had to make sure the business case was strong. At VMware, I wasn't the CEO. I was the number 2 at some point, the COO. But the end user computing case, to buy AirWatch, for example, I had to make sure the business case was strong.
Yeah.
Here I am the CEO, but even though I'm the CEO, I have a board. Yeah. The board's got to approve this business case. It took us months to get everybody comfortable. So the good news is, it's very rarely the case in business that you're a dictator making the decision on your own. Yeah. And I think that's actually good because you have checks and balances for people who have to come alongside you. It can't be a long list of people. If I have to go and get 100 people on board to make a decision, you won't get it done. Yeah. But when it's a small group of people, a brain trust helping you, now in the case of CEO, I call the shots. But I want to make sure if we're going to make a decision like the Veritas, I had to have my executive team on board with me. If I'm going to make a decision and half the executive team says, no, I don't want to go this way, it's unlikely they'll support me when we get to the boardroom. I had to make sure every board member is on board. Yeah. And it wasn't that way all along. We had to argue, we had to rationalize, and sometimes it's very frustrating. But I encourage leaders, when you want to go through that process and you're finding that somebody's resisting, it's probably the case that your business case is not strong enough.
Yeah.
So go tighten up the business case and get that person to yes.
Yeah.
There's a really good book written by William Ury, one of the greatest Israeli negotiators, called Getting to Yes.
Yeah.
He has a companion book called Getting Past No.
Yeah.
Everything in life, in the art of a deal, is getting past no or getting to yes.
Yes.
And these are two good skills that every leader, I mean, you're gonna, and it's not just in business. There are people in your life. It might be a spouse, it might be a best friend, it might be a child. It's a negotiation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You're trying to get them past no or you're trying to get them to yes.
Yeah.
And I think this idea of persuasive, putting the facts on the table, in some cases, like at home, I don't make any decisions. I'm not king of the house. Let them all make the decisions. I'm going along. Maybe here I have to make a decision of few, but you want to be able to do it where the collective consensus is in support of your decision as opposed to steamrolling. Decisions that are made where you're just a dictator steamrolling over people, they don't last.
Yes, I totally agree with you. You mentioned it in so many interviews and you strongly promote servant leadership. I studied Cialdini's framework for persuasiveness because I used to do motivational speaking, and there we use different techniques. You create a fear, you create greed, and you speak nicely, you reward. So what do you think in servant leadership works for you when you're persuading like 2,000 employees to switch to something?
Well, I think, I had a very skeptical reporter come to me once and said, your servant leadership framework's a bunch of crap, because most of leaders today in the Silicon Valley succeed because they're jerks.
Or they're type A.
Yeah, so I think what you have to first of all understand, it doesn't mean that just because I'm a servant leader, I'm a doormat that you walk over, or I'm a pushover. People know that I'm pretty tough. I can be tough on people when they're not performing to the level they want to. I can be stubborn too, sometimes where people say, I'm not a good enough listener. So the key is, listen, in a negotiation, you have to be tough in fighting for you, but you're not doing it in a way where you're a jerk. It has to be done with fact. And it has to be done in a way where you can leave the negotiation, and even if there were some tense moments, you can give the other person a warm handshake or a hug, and you move forward. There's rarely been a negotiation where someone has said, no, I didn't get what I want.
Yeah.
And I've left this in a place where it was bitter.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, in business, we're all kind of friends, even competitors.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's the way I approach it, which is you bring fact to the table, you do it in a very polite, professional way, and then if you get your way, that's great. If you don't, you go back, rephrase it. Sometimes after 1 or 2, 3 tries, it's not meant to be. There's many deals I want to do that didn't happen.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's not the end of the world. You go back and form a plan B.
Yeah.
So, I that's how I think. And in general, if you have that mindset, I think it's incredible. I mean, Michael Dell, one of the people I admire a lot, wrote this book called Play Nice But Win. I mean, that's a little bit kind of how I would think with servant leadership, which is you're playing nice, but don't forget you're winning.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. That's a rare skill, very much to be cherished in Silicon Valley, because we want employees to be happy. Up until the past few decades, we've been seeing leaders who are type A, who want 80-hour work weeks. And here we have Cohesity, where you're the most loved workplace, but you're also acing the Gartner's quadrant. So wonderful. And I'd love to dig deeper in that. There's a pyramid chart you show in your leadership talks, which I really love. And what I feel is the leader is at the bottom.
Yes,
it's an
inverted
pyramid.
Yeah.
And I feel you talk to as many level employees as you can. You try to get first-hand information versus looking at a report and not being in touch. Is that
no,
that
absolutely.
Right?
Listen, I've talked widely about, you have a group of birds sitting on a tree. The CEO bird is saying things, and all the bottom first leaf level birds look up and they see just crap flowing downhill. We invert that pyramid. And I've also talked about the power of an organization is at the individual contributor, first level manager.
Yeah.
Everybody else is just bureaucracy. Now, I'm not saying that because I want every second, third, and fourth level manager to feel like they're not value add. I can't have 2,000 employees of Cohesity report directly to me. But I want the individual contributors, engineers and sales reps, to know they're the most powerful people in the company.
Yeah.
And all of us as managers above them are there to take the obstacles out of the way, right?
Yeah.
When you have that mindset, then you actually cherish not just talking to your team in this type of boardroom. You cherish talking to an individual contributor as an engineer. You make time for them.
Yeah.
I have people often who reach out and say, can I talk to you? I said, absolutely. Now, if you come to me and all you're doing is whining about your boss, that's not going to be effective, right?
Yeah.
I'd say go and resolve with your boss. But if you've got an idea or things that we're not doing, I want to hear about it, because often it's shielded inside a whole bunch of morass and bureaucracy. And I think the more that you delayer the company, you allow fewest layers between the CEO and that leaf level, and you constantly look for span of control that's broad, and the people with the best ideas win, not the best politics.
Yeah.
You create a sustaining sustaining great company. So there's multiple techniques in which we've tried to do that. I'm constantly looking for ways, whether it was a 80,000 person at SAP, to do coffee corners with the individual contributors. You make yourself infinitely accessible. I mean, listen, you said we work, I work probably 60 hours a week, maybe sometimes 7 or 80. So I wouldn't say that just because we're a great workplace to work, that people here work slack or they work less. They just work intelligently and they enjoy it, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned coffee corners. Was that like a metaphor, or you actually did?
No, I mean, in the old days before COVID, it was a coffee corner. We'd all get together in the corner and we'd all bring a cup of coffee. I started that at SAP and developed in VMware. I mean, you could do a virtual coffee corner in Zoom after the pandemic. But we'll often get people on a Zoom now because it's remote or in small corners, and we'll just have a discussion about whatever is top of mind to them. And with Zoom, you could do this very easily because you could pick 15, 20 people. You don't want it to be too large a group.
Yeah.
And you want to do it in a way where that small group has an opportunity to ask any question on their mind.
Yeah, like get enough people that you can share a pizza with, and then you can
have
a conversation.
10, 12 people.
Yeah, wonderful. So on that note, I know you are very passionate about data analytics and now data security, backup, and management. You've seen this technology evolve, and there are a lot of bets you've made on artificial intelligence. So what is somebody like you who's seen this grow, from a idea on a table into a large product which deployed to thousands of people? How do you think the generative AI trend is going to shape the future of hyperconvergence or the space you're in generally?
I mean, today Gaia, which is our heart generative AI, is not yet at thousands of customers. I hope it is. It's just been launched last month, but it will be and it can be. When I was in college, I was very interested in optimization algorithms, in analytics. We would build chess games and wanted to see how we could make the computer play chess or play Scrabble. But at that time, artificial intelligence was all based on what's called expert systems, not based on all of the great inference and learning training algorithms that we have now, and GPUs didn't exist. And I've been following the whole world of ML and AI for a long time, and very, very intrigued by AI algorithms. When GPT-4 came out and people were talking about OpenAI, I started to ask it. It's a great summarization tool to summarize some of the speeches I gave at SAP to see if it could do that very well, and also summarize some of the speeches of people I admired in life. Because I love reading summaries of speeches, and those often give me ideas of what I should say next. And then it dawned on me, the summarization tool is an LLM. Ultimately, yes, OpenAI or Vertex or Bedrock or Anthropic, they're all going to be good at that. But the company with the most data was going to win.
Yes.
Because this was going to feed an LLM, and as a result, Office 365 would have a product, it's called Copilot, and you'd pay Microsoft $30 per user per month for that, and that's what Microsoft's doing. The database companies, Databricks, Snowflake, Oracle should win. We, at the current time, have 1 exabyte, 2 exabytes of data, but with Veritas, we will have hundreds of exabytes of data. And the question I had was, could GPT-4 be applied to search backup data in the hundreds of exabytes? That's what I knew we were going to have when we consummated the acquisition of Veritas. So last year, we were still, the Veritas was just formulating. So I went and spent some time with Satya Nadella at Microsoft and learned about this technique called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. And to make a long story short, all we did was we implemented RAG for backup, which has never been done, patented the idea because we were worried that if we talked about it too early, people would copy us. We patented the idea. And then NVIDIA came along and said, what you're doing is phenomenal. Not just do we want to be part of it, we want to invest behind you. So they put a cash equity stake in the company. Jensen featured us in his keynote not that long ago in SAP Center. It was 15 seconds of fame. And here we're off to the races with Gaia. So we're very excited about this product, but in essence, it's a very simple way to have a conversational search on top of your backup data that's hopefully all on Cohesity.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Using that tool, let's say I apply to Google's backup data. Let's say I'm an incoming CEO at Google, and I maybe I cannot get in touch with Sundar or someone else. I can just talk to the data and get a hang of what has happened in the last decade on a certain topic which I want to focus on and I want to drive my strategy on. Is that something?
Yeah, I mean, it's a slight variant of that, which is for a company, their data. This isn't the world's data. Their own data, when backed up, if we win, all the customers of the world will run in our format.
Right.
It'll be highly compressed and sit in our backup. If you are allowed, and let's assume inside there's millions of PDFs, okay, that you've written over time. It's all backed up, compressed.
Yeah.
If you want to ask a question on those millions of PDFs, and you as a user are allowed to, listen, that's very important.
Yes.
Not everybody is allowed to ask a question on documents, that's confidential documents of the company. If you're allowed to, this tool will summarize that and give you the answer. Okay? So you're not asking this the meaning of life. It's not asking you how to fight a battle of depression. It's basically saying, in my sea of documents in 2013, for example, we wrote a whole set of documents on risk or a breach.
Yeah.
I'm now the new CISO. Can you summarize everything we wrote then? It'll come back with you. Or I'm the CEO. I'd like to understand how the organization has been thinking about loans or risk for these loans in the past. If you're allowed to ask that question based on role-based access control, we call it responsible AI. Our tool, Gaia, will go and search, summarize it, and get back to you in a few seconds.
Amazing.
That's amazing. So you basically think of it as the world's best summarization tool of all of your data that's sitting in backup on Cohesity.
But that's amazing. But you can take it further. You can study the company's culture. I mean, of course, with all the permissions and all the policies sorted out. Provided
the documents that make up the basis for the culture are in there, right? It's not making up the culture. But let's say the previous HR leader wrote a whole bunch of documents on culture.
Yeah.
This is based on data that's in there. It's not based on phantom data, right?
Yeah.
When you ask ChatGPT a generic question about culture, it's making up some inference about it. This is the training and the data that it's working on is the company's data.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always this human first in the loop, best practice we follow. No matter what we get from the LLM, we still want a human to take a look at it, talk to others, and then make a call on what to do with the data. So I'm thrilled. I have goosebumps here. And on that note, I want to ask you, how does that change the future of work? Imagine that this concept is taken to different verticals like HR or policy or security, inspection, whatever, employee compensation, whatnot. So how is that going to change future work? Do you think we will be working differently?
I think we end up being enormously more productive. So the analogy to the ruse is, listen, in the very old days, you cleaned your apartment with a broom.
Right.
Okay. Then came a vacuum.
Yeah.
Now there's a robot.
Yeah.
Okay, that can do it for you. Is a robot taking away your job as a cleaner?
Yeah.
It's making you productive. I'll give you another example. In the old days, you wrote a document. Okay, you're a good communicator. And you would print out the document, and either you or someone who was really good at English would proofread it and mark the spellings that were mistaken. Now you have a spell check. Right. Does that make you less productive? No, it makes you more productive.
Yeah.
So you should think about Gaia like a robot. Okay, it's going to go and find everything you want for you overnight, or while you're sleeping, or while you go get a cup of coffee, and summarize it for you, which is huge. Now, I wish I had summarization in everything in my life, because often the decisions I'm trying to make is based on lots of documents and someone summarizing it for me into 3-5 bullets, right?
Yeah, amazing.
And if I want to read the whole document, it will also tell me I summarized it from these documents of the million PDFs. Yeah. You can go and read that document if you want to, but here's the summary I found for you. That's in essence what ChatGPT, it's the world's best summarization. And that becomes a draft for you of the first big area that you could do. So there's so much, the sky is the limit of where we can go with this.
Wonderful. I hate to close this conversation, so it's going so
There will be many more in the future.
Okay, I did want to ask you about how you navigated the phase where you felt rejection, because I have seen this as a pattern. Extremely successful people have a lot more failures we don't get to see. Their success is blown out of proportion, and that's what we get to see. So, how do you see rejections and failures in your life, and which you talk about very openly?
There's a really good clip by Jensen when he was talking to a group of Stanford students
Yeah.
who said, he said, all of you are high, type A, very successful. I wish on you a whole bunch of failures because you will not learn resilience.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, I resonate with that a lot. When you look at my curve view of my life journey, and I often do this with leaders as I train them, I ask them to plot their life journey on an axis where the x-axis is time and the y-axis is up and downs in life. And if you think, you look at my journey, it's been up and to the right, that's not true. I mean, people who know me pretty intimately know there's ups and downs. And my own testimony is that I've learned more in the valleys of my life. Don't have time to go into a lot of it, but yeah, I mean, you talked about the time at Informatica where I was fired. And one fine day, CEO decided he wanted somebody else. That's okay. I mean, these decisions happen. And sometimes you will find those decisions are made not because of competence. I thought I was the best person for that job. He didn't. That's okay. We moved on. I'm still friends with him. I disagreed with the decision that, the company ended up going through some brass. It doesn't even matter. The CEO decision of VMware happened in 2021. It was me versus my good friend Raghu. The world thought I was going to get picked. He got picked. I was delighted for him. So when you face rejection, and by the way, all of these are first world problems to have.
Yeah.
The week the board decided that I was not the CEO of VMware, what was happening in the world? There were thousands of my countrymen dying in India of the COVID virus, Delta variant. And I thought to myself, me saying I got rejected is stupid. Yeah. This is a mosquito bite compared to people who are dying. Yeah. Yeah. So any of the failures I've faced in my life are nothing compared. When I've done this, there are people whose parents committed suicide. I mean, those are like absolutely like stuff in life that shocks you, right? Yeah. So I think, listen, when you encounter failure, what you might consider failures, first off, bounce back. Secondly, talk to people who faced worse than you. Yeah. And you'll find that what you're going through is a mosquito bite. Yeah. And the human spirit is extremely resilient. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I think, quite frankly, not getting the CEO job at VMware opened up something probably even bigger here over time. Absolutely. I'm super excited about this. And had I still been at VMware, who knows what would have happened, right? So I look at Informatica, it opened up the opportunity to go to SAP. So, there's sort of the saying, when one door closes, there's going to be two windows that open.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, your quote on service, you said you slept and dreamt that life was...
That's Tagore.
Tagore. Life is joy, and then you saw it was service, and then you acted and service was joy.
Well said.
You run a capitalistic setup here. You're out to make profits. How do you remember that quote? When do you remember that quote?
Well, quite frankly, while we're here to make profits for our shareholders, not a dime. I'm not driven by wealth. I mean, yes, I've made more than I deserve, and I'm blessed by that. When you go to the grave, you're not taking your money with you. You can't even bury it with you. Yeah. So what you're remembered by, I always ask myself, on my tombstone, I don't want to be like his net worth was X. Your character is what's going to be impactful. Yeah. The values you've left in your next generation and the people that you've touched, that's a lot more impactful than your fame, your fortune. So when you have people in your life who bring you down to earth, my kids could care less that I'm the CEO of Cohesity. Yeah. They want to know that I'm in their lives. Yeah, right? Yeah, absolutely. My mom would tell me, leave your trophies outside the house. You're just my son. Yeah. So we've got to find ways by which we have people in our life who bring us down to earth. Yeah. And when you have those people in your life who bring you down to earth, cherish that. Yeah. Because when you go to your grave one day, it's only going to dust. There's nothing left. Yeah. And you see these people who are buried in that car. It's stupid. I mean, you have nothing left. Yeah. So I think that's the mindset with which we try to live. That's the way I try to create value to this company. And hopefully over time you build a great company, one person at a time, one customer at a time, and it becomes enormous fun. Yeah, amazing. On that profound note, very reluctantly, I have to close this conversation. We'll do it again sometime. Yes. It's super power packed. Thank you so much, Sanjay. Thank you, Vida. All the best, and thank you for all that you do in the community and for these podcasts. And I wish you and the viewers all the very best. Thank you.